Oxygen is essential to life, and the use of supplemental oxygen is the difference between life and death in many acute conditions. Oxygen is essential to life, and the use of supplemental oxygen is the difference between life and death in many acute conditions. In some cases, the use of high levels of oxygen is actually required. At these high levels, there are risks with its use. There are consequences to hyperoxia and subsequent oxygen toxicity, which I'll discuss now. Alright you guys, welcome back to another video lesson from ICU Advantage. My name is Eddie Watson, and my goal is to give you guys the confidence to succeed in the ICU by making these complex critical care subjects easy to understand. I truly hope that I'm able to do just that, and if I am, I do invite you to subscribe to the channel down below. When you do, make sure you hit that bell icon and select all notifications so you never miss out when I release a new lesson. As always, the notes for this lesson as well as all the previous videos are available exclusively to the YouTube and Patreon members. You can find links to join both of those down in the lesson description below. Also, don't forget to head over to icuadvantage.com or follow that link down in the lesson description to take a quiz on this lesson, test your knowledge while also being entered into a weekly gift card. As well as don't forget that you can help support this channel through the purchase of an ICU Advantage sticker. Again, those are found at the website icuadvantage.com/support, link down in the description. So in this lesson, I'm going to talk about how the use of high oxygen can potentially be detrimental to our patients. That being said, there are things that increase the risk, as well as times where in order to prevent life-threatening hypoxia, the use of high levels are actually needed. Because of these negative consequences though, this is why the ARDS-NET protocols that I did discuss in my lesson covering ARDS diagnosis and management, this is why they set out these protocols to have lower SpO2 targets of that 88 to 95%. This was to try and reduce the risk of these higher oxygen levels. At the end of the day, it's important to understand the risks that come with it and that high levels should really be avoided when possible. Unfortunately, this is not always the case, and the need for oxygen in the presence of hypoxia must be weighed against the risks of using such high levels. Alright, so let's start things off here and talk a little bit about oxygen, hyperoxia, and oxygen toxicity. So the concept of potential consequences of oxygen is really nothing new, and it actually was first discovered all the way back in the 18th century. There has been much debate around this topic though in that time, so this has kind of led us to some of the perspectives that we have today. Now, oxygen plays a critical role in our cellular respiration and the production of ATP. At the same time, it has very strong oxidizing properties that can actually damage even biological material. So one common example of oxidation that we're all familiar with is rust. And while this is not a direct comparison to what's actually happening in the body, it is helpful to remember when we're thinking about oxidizing damage. So here, as we can see in this picture here, when metal reacts to oxygen and water, rust is formed, and corrosive damage all result from these two seemingly harmless molecules. Again, while this is not what's actually happening inside of our bodies, it is important to kind of relay and connect these two concepts of this oxidative damage taking place. Now, the term hyperoxia is actually when we have tissue that's going to be exposed to high levels of oxygen above what is normal. And this is really the result of breathing air that has a partial pressure of oxygen greater than normal atmospheric air. And so when we breathe air with high levels of oxygen, we can actually see the partial pressure of oxygen in the tissues rise and rise until it's in the hundreds or even thousands. Now, hyperoxia, if it's high enough, can lead to oxygen toxicity, and this is a result of the harmful effects of oxygen. So this hyperoxia can actually lead to increased levels of reactive oxygen species, which can interact with tissue, damaging things like lipid membranes, proteins, and nucleic acid. Now, I am going to discuss some of the pathophysiology here in a minute, but the accumulation of changes from hyperoxia can lead to damage of alveolar epithelial, as well as alveolar capillary endothelial cells. This damage can lead to a cascade of changes, such as the ones that I discussed in our discussion of ARDS in that first lesson, and this includes increased capillary permeability and damage to the surfactant-producing type 2 cells. All of these changes can lead to acute lung injury or ARDS depending on the severity of the damage. And these changes are going to be directly related to the level of the partial pressure of oxygen. So the quantity of oxygen that we're delivering, the duration of our patient's exposure to that oxygen, as well as the atmospheric pressure delivered, all impact the total dose delivered and the potential damage. All right, so let's dive in a little bit into the pathophysiological changes that we see with the hyperoxia and oxygen toxicity